Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. David Gouthro back with Discover Fresh Perspectives. And today we're going to have some with my guest, Russ Cullingworth. Welcome, Russ.
Hi, David. Good to be here.
So, Russ, I'm never quite sure how people come to be on this podcast. In this particular case, it's because someone that we respect in common said, "Hey, I think you might enjoy chatting with Russ." So here we are. And when you signed up for the podcast, Russ, you said one of the things that you were really interested in and passionate about is imagination. So when did you start focusing on imagination? How did you come to that? I haven't heard anyone else talking about that as being something that's a kind of a critical skill or something to hold on to as an individual. How'd you come to that?
Yeah, it's a bit of a long journey and a long story, and it's tied in with creativity. So imagination and creativity very similar. Creativity is also called divergent thinking, which leads to innovation. So all these areas, imagination, creativity, innovation, and critical thinking are all associated, but all have a different nuance to them. But it started, I was a very creative child, lead actor in the school play, trumpeter in the school band, boys choir, lead singer in the boys choir. I'd get home and sketch Mad magazine comics, very creative child. My dad and my brother, who were both much more analytical thinkers, advised me to go into accounting as a career, a solid career. And for 20 years, I really lost touch with my creativity. This work that I'm doing now is very associated with Sir Ken Robinson's work on education.
Mm-hmm.
And someone asked me the other day, why do we lose our imagination? And Ken Robinson says, we don't grow out of it. In fact, we're educated out of it. And so
Russ, I want to stop you just a second, because not everyone, I'm familiar with him, but maybe just say a little bit about Ken Robinson for those that haven't heard his name before.
Yeah, so Ken Robinson's a highly renowned education speaker, speaking about creativity in education and the importance of it, mostly in childhood education, because it's at grade 4 level. So there was a study done over a period, I can't remember the exact length of the study, but it was children begin to abandon imagination and creativity at around grade 4, which is 9 or 10 years old. We start to abandon our imagination. And Ken Robinson talks about how, with focus on the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM subjects, creativity is pushed aside in schooling to our detriment.
And can you just repeat that? Because I cut you off the phrase and what Ken Robinson said, because I think that's pretty important.
Yeah. So he said, we don't grow out of creativity. We're educated out of it.
Right.
And so unless we're doing activities that continue to spark our imagination, we tend to not do it. So back to my story, just how I got into this was having been an accountant for 20 years, being a misfit in accounting, another long story. Obviously, it was around the age of 40, after 20 years, that I left the profession, and suddenly I had this creative explosion. And because certainly in the accounting profession, engineering, there's not a lot of room for creativity, it's not rewarded in many ways. So as long story short, I left the profession to teach emotional intelligence.
Okay.
And I did that for 8 years, which also was a very powerful journey of self-discovery and understanding more about myself and my self-awareness. But it led me into creating, I wanted to create an online course. This was about 2015. I was like, I should put my emotional intelligence into an online course. So I started looking into that. And quite honestly, David, at that time, online learning was just emerging. but it was boring. I didn't like it at all. I didn't like sitting and watching people talking at me and having to sit in front of a screen. So I wanted to create this audio course, but I knew it had to be really good. Like if it's going to be audio, it has to be good. So we started building in storytelling and scenarios with voice actors acting scenarios in audio. We put in music and sound effects and interviews with experts and media clips. Um, and we did that. We've been doing that for 8 years. But about a year ago, someone said to me, if you think this is about audio learning, you're missing the point. He's like, this is about imagination. What you guys are doing is about imagination. You need to go look into this. And over the past year, I've discovered what storytelling does, which is spark your imagination. Because when I tell you there's a big woolly mammoth walking up my driveway, in your mind, you will picture a woolly mammoth. And so as we tell stories, we allow the learner to become co-creator. So they create their own images. We don't provide them the images. So we've just discovered this. Audiobooks are very similar. They do the same. They have the same function. Reading books actually does the same function, sometimes even better, because your brain is creating the images, and that's where the imagination part comes from, as a way to exercise your brain.
So there's a couple of things that occur to me, and one, and this may be really basic, but when you say imagination, how do you define that? Well, like, paint us a picture of
Yeah,
imagination.
yeah. I think it's the ability to visualize mentally,
Hmm.
um, whether it's a concept or a new idea, or putting together clues from various sources. So if you're sitting in a meeting and people are making comments, that you can tie those comments together through imagining
Hmm.
and turning them around in your brain, being able to examine them. There is also research that shows that using your imagination by listening to a story, for example, uses your whole brain. So it actually
Hmm.
the neuroscience is that it increases the pathways in your brain for synapses to pass through, so they can go faster. So yeah.
So, when I say imagination and image, I think some of my colleagues are deep into neurolinguistic programming. They talk about, kinesthetic learning, visual learning, auditory learning. So I could kind of see what a visual learner would may gravitate more towards imagination. But how about both those that are kinesthetic and auditory? Are they able to do that as well to the same extent?
Yeah, I mean, people would think that listening to audio storytelling is really for auditory learners. The whole concept of learning styles is being debunked now.
Okay.
In the professional learning world, that learning styles are not. So I haven't done a lot of research into the debunking, but I've had a lot of feedback from professional learning and development people that learning styles are not a thing anymore. So what I want to say though is one thing to realize. There's another research paper that talks about what they did was they watched people's brains while they did creative exercises,
Mhm.
and examined. This is high neuroscience. I had to use AI to help me understand this article. But what their findings was that when you're using your creative brain, it's areas of your brain that are not connected with your eyes.
Hmm.
So for me, that's significant, because when you're watching something, you're consuming that visual data. You're not creating it. So mental imaging is creating the images in your brain, not with your eyes. And so when you watch something, and whether it's TV or learning or YouTube, you're really consuming someone else's imagination of what that event looked like.
So here's my theory
Yeah.
that I've just developed like
Yeah.
17 seconds ago. And what I'm picturing is that part of the brain where these images form, that there's three funnels that come into it. And one funnel comes from the ear, one funnel comes from the eyes, one funnel comes from the touch. But once that's in there, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It's all in this sort of place where for image, where imagination takes place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, also past experience. So when you start talking about imagination and visual imaging, um, you're creating it from your own data bank of imagery, right? So if I say there was my boss was a really tall woman with a sharp personality and highly efficient, you'll begin to put in your own image of that person based on your past experience,
Right.
where mine would be completely different,
Huh.
right? So you would begin to add in. So it's very, very powerful in learning because it creates a unique experience for each learner. So your experience of what that scene, if we do an audio scenario and you hear the voices and the sound effects, what your picture of that scene looks like is going to be completely different to anybody else's.
So, so that person becomes a kind of a co-producer as
That's
opposed to
right.
just a consumer.
Yeah. So we call it co-creator. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier when we first started chatting about engineers and engineering and things like that, and
Yeah.
imagination not really being valued. And it's kind of funny because it occurs to me that in order for something new to come out to be produced, it's going to require some imagination of one sort, like putting together random elements, but then seeing possibility there. So I would think that engineers, maybe you don't want an accountant to be too creative because it might stray into slightly illegal things, right? If you don't have the moral code on top of that. But it seems to me for society to advance, like I can't imagine advancing beyond our ability to imagine
Yeah.
what it might be.
No, and I mean, there are, I'm not saying that engineers aren't creative.
Right.
They need to be, they must be creative because when you're building the bridge and you want it to be stylish and look beautiful, I mean, any engineer could build a concrete block across the river and call it a bridge. But, if you look at design aspects and all the elements of engineering that go into designing a bridge that looks great, um, what I'm saying is that engineers on the ability and the skill of creativity is not developed in their training. And I in my book I've interviewed a clinical psychologist out of New York. Her name's Lee Jerome,
Mm,
and she's in my book, and she's the founder of a nonprofit called Relational Space,
mm.
which explores the intersection of creativity with the real world. It's quite an interesting concept, but she said, creativity is a skill that can be developed. And you might think accountants can't be creative. Well, when I was an accountant and I had to present my budget binder to the board of directors, I would add in pictures of, I was at Canough Place Children's Hospice at the time,
Hmm.
and I would add in pictures of children and families and where their money where the money is going. So if it was for the recreation program, I'd show pictures of the recreation program, and so there is a need for creativity. If a computer programmer who's programming a website with code, they have to have a mental image of what that website's going to look like once they've done that code, and what their app is going to look like with the user interface. So again, there's another need for creativity in a profession you might not think is creative. Think
So
of as creative.
so it seems to me any time there is a problem to be solved, it requires creativity. I mean, and even the term solve, implies that there's something you don't have that you need, right? If it was something that was a mistake and you just kind of keep fixing it the same way, it doesn't require a lot of creativity. It's just execution.
Yeah,
But anytime there's a problem, and that could be in any realm,
yeah,
certainly that must require creativity.
yeah. And are we educating our children out of it? I believe that the education model of the school system has translated into the university system and into the professional development system, where it's It's sit still and watch the teacher and listen to the teacher and do your test and pass the test and get your completion certificate. Um, so we very much have that same model where it's not experiential. The scenarios are a super powerful way to learn because when you listen to a scenario, even when you watch one actually on TV, and this is why so many people confuse television shows with reality, is because when you watch that, your brain puts you in that situation.
Interesting.
It's more powerful in audio because you've created the whole scene, and so to put yourself in there is a lot easier because there's no character that you're watching who's playing you. And so our brains put ourselves in those scenarios, which is a very powerful way to learn.
So there's two questions, at least two questions I want to ask. The first one is you said your book. So, and I'll tell you what the second one is so you can prepare.
Mhm.
And the second one is, so how do you teach people to trust or to use their imagination? But let's back up to the book. So could you just say a little bit about the book? And for those that are listening, we'll make sure that we put the title and where you can
Yeah,
access it in the program notes. So what's your book,
yeah.
Russ?
So my book is Learn to Imagine. It's called
Oh,
a leader's guide to discovering the secret to effective learning. It's really written for HR leaders and learning and development. Although learning and development tend to be much more of a closed group because they're still in the instructional design models that come from the education system. So I'm trying to change the perception there of the sit still and watch the teacher and do the test the hell out of people. so they're not as open an audience, and hopefully I will find some that are have got that vision. But the book itself is a story. So of course I'm a storyteller.
mm,
And so the book itself is a story of a company, fictional company called Cardiotech that I created, and I've got all these characters who have backstories. We
oh,
use
cool.
we use cardiotech in other learning courses where there's other things happening. So we're trying to build a learning ecosystem of these characters, which don't have faces. By the way, they don't have
Mm,
faces. The learner or the whoever's interacting can create their own face for the CEO, Monica Duncan, and the chief human resource officer, and all the characters we have at Cardiotech. They're Vancouver based bio. They make high tech cardiology
oh, wow.
equipment, and so there's quite a story there with Monica and Brett, who founded the company, and what happened with them. And now Monica's the CEO and controlling shareholder, but there's there's a whole history there.
So
Yeah. So the book. Yeah.
I'm imagining that's probably, overusing the term given the nature of our
Mhm.
conversation, but
Yeah.
that would be that book, is it an audio format?
We are working on it. We actually are struggling, to be honest, to find the characters. So we've been trying to cast the characters to play the roles in audio.
Mm,
We don't want it to be read by one person. I'm trying to find actors to play each of the roles, and it's more challenging than
huh.
I thought it would be because I have my own idea of what they sound like, and when we get these auditions from voice actors, they just don't meet my expectations. Yeah. So the story just follows Nicola, who's the chief human resource officer, and she's just started a few months before. It gets a gets a wealth of complaints from employees about the poor quality learning and
Mm,
not accessible, and so she begins a journey to discover and find better options for them. Of course, the other powerful thing about audio is that people can do it in their car. So,
right.
and
Yes.
I'm a firm believer that we don't. One of the other experts I interviewed in the book, Kristen, um, she uh, she brought up this term, the age of distracted learning, and she said COVID has taught us about distracted learning, which is very true. We've learned that we can actually learn while we're washing the dishes,
Hmm.
and we can, because we sit in webinars and wash the dishes, or do other things, cook dinner while we're listening. So I'm a firm believer in distracted learning, that we can, if especially if it's storytelling and it's engaging our brain, we can be doing other things because we will carry that story. That story will carry itself, you know.
So,
So the book, that's what the book is, how they discover this form of learning that's imagination based. That's
but,
really, yeah.
and when this call's over, I have a couple of suggestions. You might be able to find some of those actors. But so two questions. I was just going to ask one more, but I do have at least two more. So one of them
Yeah.
is, how do you make the business case for senior leaders to invest in helping the people be more creative, be more imaginative? So, what's the business case for that? But then how do you actually go about teaching people to use their imagination better? So first of all, what's the business case for being more
Yeah.
imaginative?
Yeah. So, I mean, creativity is the number. There was IBM did a study of 1,500 CEOs. Creativity came up as the number one business skill that they wanted. And even in the age of artificial intelligence, um, you need to be a creative thinker to think of the right questions to ask
Hmm.
artificial intelligence, and also a critical thinker to be able to critically assess the answers that it gives you. So imagination, so I've got a research page on my website, and I'll send it to you. But there's a research page that's got all the articles to back up how imagination improves creativity and critical thinking skills. So that's the one business case. The other one is, why would you have if you have employees that bill by the hour, like accountants or lawyers or even engineers, why would you have them sitting in a 3 hour or 6 hour online course during their workday when they could be doing that while they drive to work and back, or to the job site and back? So there's a business case of using that time to learn, even if you pay them the lost billing hours. I did a little quick calculation the other day of an accounting firm with 122 CPAs. You can see my background's in accounting. That's why I use it. But it's got 122 CPAs at different levels, and they each do 20 hours a year of lost billing time, added up to $622,000. So if you could do a quarter of that or half of it in mobile, like listening to stories while you're driving, you could recover it. That'll go straight to your bottom line, that kind of revenue, you know?
Well, and I wonder, even with those stats, the hours that they spend, what percent of it is actually absorbed to the point that they can use it,
Yeah,
as
is it
opposed
even
to just having.
effective?
Yeah, exactly. You like to sit through
Yeah.
some for continuing education credits or things like that. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
do my ticket off. I'm never going to use this, but I got my credits.
Yeah, and so in the book I talk about the illusion of learning, where that takes place, where you get your completion certificate, but you've really learned nothing. And I've spoken to a lot of people through the years who just skip through their content. I spoke to a partner of an accounting firm they had to do 60 hours a year. He's like, "There's no way I can do that." So
Yeah.
they had a formula they would use to get through the quiz at the end without having done the content. And so it's just this unspoken phenomenon in professional learning, is this illusion that people have actually learned something where they really haven't. And there are real world consequences to that, especially when it comes to respectful workplace policy and safety, regulatory. Um, you know, um, I'll give you so there were the two. There's the value of creativity. There's the lost productive hours. The third main one is just the pure enjoyability and effectiveness of learning. And we've just finished our third course for the Greater Vancouver Realtors,
Oh,
who are one
okay.
of our clients, and it's a rules of cooperation. It's 50 pages of rules that realtors have to follow. And you try and do a regular course on that with bullet points and slides. They're not going to retain any of that.
Yep.
Um, so we've created this series called Realtor Reality, which follows Julie, who's an unscrupulous realtor who goes around breaking all the rules. And these are actors that act it out, and there's other realtors involved, and clients and phone calls and emails, and it's all sound effects. So it's done really well, and people enjoy it and they remember it because they're going to remember Julie and what she did. So
Well, I guess remember it because you've engaged with it. Like, you've created something. You brought. I think you're talking earlier about, you bring something to whatever that trigger, that stimulus is. Whether it's auditory, whatever. And so it's more ingrained, or um, committed to or something like that if you've
Yeah.
had to do that.
I'll
So
give you just a quick example from my book is
please.
because my book is a story and it's got characters. There's a particular character in there, Betty Trundle, who's a bit of a no personality, and she resists everything that her boss is trying to do to bring in some new energy. And but when I talk to people, they know, and they know what Betty did, and they can be like, "Oh, Betty,"
Mm,
I kind of feel for her because I realize her where's she coming from, and so I can have these conversations with people, which in a technical book you would never have. You
right.
know?
I
So,
love
so
that.
that's the fun part. Yeah,
So then, Russ, so people have now seen that it's important to them. Let's say they bought into that for whatever reason.
yeah,
So how do you teach that? Like, it's one thing about having the awareness, this is important, but how do you develop the skill or the habits of
that's
using
really
one's imagination?
that's a really great question because I've had a number of people say to me, I can't do audio. When I start listening to audio, my brain just goes somewhere else and I forget to listen
Mm,
or they've never so to me that's like going to a gym the first day and expecting to lift 50-pound weights, it doesn't happen.
mm,
Or to, run a 5K without any practice, you know, uh, training yourself. I would recommend audiobooks as a good start. Audible is one of my favorite, but
mm, mm,
just listening to your books or, even starting to read is a good start. To just start getting your brain used to it. And in my book, actually, I've got an exercise where I ask people to describe the characters they're imagining. So that's another step is to
mm.
begin to practice acknowledging the images that are forming in your brain when someone's telling you a story and stop and say, what does this person really look like in my mind? Uh, and so I'll begin, but once you get into it and you start training your brain to listen to audio stories, it's just opens a whole nother world of of colorful imagery and people that that you've created in your brain. Actually,
I love that because that particular approach is kind of like a soft door entry into the notion of imagination. I think once people start to do that and sense that it's not about tell me exactly what this person looks like. You're going to be creative now. It's giving them an opportunity to have that conversation. Then they realize, oh, I can do this. Right? How
and
many
there's a
people
person
tell?
there. Yeah,
Yeah, like how many
yeah,
people tell themselves that they're not creative because their view of someone's creative, they have to be an artist, a visual artist,
that's
or
right.
have to be a
Yeah,
writer, things like that. When in fact they express their creativity in different ways, but don't
yeah.
acknowledge it, and so don't build on it and value it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, um, an engineer who builds a beautiful bridge or a coder who builds a beautiful website or an accountant who
Mm,
does a beautiful graph that tells a story to their audience
mm,
of what that graph is explaining. All those are ways to be extreme, the value of creativity, and just even the way
mm.
to analyze data for anybody in any profession, to take data and start rotating it in your brain as to like, it's almost like a pivot table in Excel, but you could do it in your brain. What are other ways I can view this data that's going to tell the story I need to tell or I wanted to tell? And so there's these are tremendously powerful skills that we don't put any value on in our society. Well, we value them, but we don't value how to create them, how to develop them. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me it's tremendous differentiator because these days everyone can have basically access to the same information.
yeah,
And the opportunities come out of putting it together in different ways, putting something
yeah,
beside each other or on top of each other or all that sort of thing. So, it's kind of hard to imagine growing without being able to do that, quite frankly. I can't even, well, I can't imagine it.
yeah, yeah. And I think the other getting into this habit of exercising your imagination on a regular basis also makes your brain more flexible for growth in other areas like adopting AI and understanding how to be creative with it and use it as a tool. It's not going to take over your life or your work necessarily, but understanding and being, it's like brain elasticity, uh, giving you that ability to be of a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. Uh, yeah.
So let me
Allowing the brain to rewire itself. Yeah.
yes, yeah, and there's so much about that now that's available. Not everyone is as aware of it
Yeah.
as you are, right? So, two more things
Yeah.
maybe to wrap up, and one of them to put you on the spot a little bit. But the first question, I'll give you both questions. The first one is, what are some myths that people have about imagination? And the second thing is just to leave our listeners with, if you wanted to improve your imagination, what are two or three things you could do to get started on it? So, perhaps first, what are some myths that people hold about imagination?
Yeah. I mean, I've been reading some articles, and there's a huge myth is that it's for children.
Sorry
Um,
that it's
for children.
oh,
You
for
know,
children.
yeah,
Okay.
that
Uh,
imagination is a childish at characteristic, and once we stop being children, there's no room for it.
Wow, that's
Um,
sad.
that's one of the myths. And yeah, I think the other one is the belief of that certain people are more creative, like you said, like that artists or painters or sculptors are the creatives, and then there's us, and then there's the rest of the world who are all left brain thinkers. Uh, so um, so that's another myth, is that if I'm an accountant or a lawyer or an engineer or a doctor, even I don't need imagination for my job. Yeah, so that's I think those are the main myths, is that it's not we've forgotten that it's important.
Mm,
We for since the beginning, since the dawn of man, we've been telling stories and learning through storytelling and through imagination, because I love the image of a tribe sitting around a campfire with the elders describing the history and events that the tribe has had to face. And corporate storytelling is another big powerful area
mm,
of that's growing in recognition, but it is that imagining those struggles. And so that's another area. There's one thing I've actually forgotten to mention, which I discovered the other day, is that empathy is a really big topic. It's been written about by Chris Voss in, I don't know if you know Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. Uh, Chris Voss was an international hostage negotiator. Uh, so for terrorism, for international terrorism. And so he writes about empathy in hostage negotiations at the top level, international terrorism level. Mark Goulston was a FBI. He trained FBI hostage negotiators in empathy, how to use empathy.
wow.
And I realized the other day, empathy requires imagination,
Mm,
because what you need to do with empathy is imagine the experience of the other person. And so you're taking the data you have, you're adding it all together to to try to understand their perspective and what they're experiencing. But that takes imagining. A lot of it is imagining what they must feel right now. Uh,
yeah, I just
uh,
I just think of, some conversations I've had where people have gone through some incredible hardships, and I found myself saying, I can't even imagine
yeah,
what that's been like. It's kind of
yeah.
like how far that is from my experience that I can't even imagine it. Wow.
Yeah, so that just struck me the other day. I did a post
Yeah,
on LinkedIn about it, about how empathy requires imagination.
very
And then
interesting.
to get onto your other question was, how do people start?
Mhm.
If your library has great resources, including books and audiobooks. There's an app called Libby. You can
Oh,
sign up with your
yes.
library card and get free audiobooks. But I encourage everybody to read, right? Like when you're watching TV, so much of that reading time has been replaced with television and social media now. And like I said, I call it, your brain has become a couch potato, because it's really not doing any work while you're watching television, even if it's a really great series like Game of Thrones or something. But get a book and read it. I started reading the Game of Thrones books, and
Oh,
it's a different experience than watching the show. So just start reading a fiction book and find one that you like. I really like the Jack Reacher series. People watch it on Prime. It's nowhere near as good on Prime as it was in the books. So find something you like and read. And if you can, get the audiobook and listen, and then see what's happening in your brain when Jack Reacher's in the middle of a fight in a street in Boston or something, and how your brain is just so many images are being generated by your brain. It's actually incredible when you
Now,
pay attention to it.
now, I don't imagine this is a problem for anybody, but I know that my daughter is a voracious reader, like unbelievable.
Yeah,
And she'll read a book, and then her interpretation of that is what's right. So I remember when she was reading the Harry Potter series and then goes to watch the video. That's not right. That's not
yeah.
the way it happened. Like the reality is what she's created in her mind, not what someone else has put in front of her just to absorb. Very, very interesting.
It's fair, and that just explains the power of it, David, because the experience, and this is time and time again, the experience of people who've read a book compared to the movie when they watch the movie is very disappointing, because they have co-created their own imagery and their own characters, and now they see someone else's idea of what this character looks like. And in some ways, it's offensive because it doesn't match at all what I imagined them to look like, right? So that's a very powerful. I mean, my little story is when I was about 12, I got my hands on a double LP of War of the Worlds.
Oh,
It's
yes.
Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, a musical, and it was a transformational experience for me because it's so descriptive, and my imagination just went crazy as a 12-year-old, and I've never watched a movie that's ever met that experience. And then when the movie came out of War of the Worlds, I was disappointed naturally, because it was like, man, this is not nearly as powerful and realistic and vivid and everything as my brain had created in my own mind.
So you're triggering all kinds of other memories for me here, Russ. I remember when I was about that age, there was a radio show with Rod Coneybear and someone else,
Yeah.
and they were having this telling a story about things like where science related. So now we're traveling through the blood vessel and stuff like that, and whatever it was so colorful and so rich, and there are all kinds of hooks that got my imagination. And, I can't remember all the details, but I can remember how powerful it was just listening to
Unforgettable.
those.
Can be unforgettable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
my wife and I did our why story, why we do what we do, and it's called What We Learned from the Martians, which is
So,
from War of the Worlds. And I'll send you the link. It's on YouTube, and you can maybe share it. It's audio, so you can
uh,
maybe attach it to the podcast, and people can listen to it at the end if they want. But it's got sound effects. It really does it in story style, which is what we do.
so one other thought just occurred to me is that, I, I, I read, I used to read just a ton of science fiction. At one point, it was all I read. I remember one called Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein. And it was probably 40, maybe 50 years, probably 50 years ago when I read it. And then I started listening to it again, and I didn't, it was a totally different experience. Like I didn't remember it that way. And, I wonder if we read the same book, there's very few books that I read over and over and over again. But if I do, just seeing it, what I missed the first time and how you build this,
Mm.
this is fascinating.
Yeah, and some narrators are really excellent at elevating the book, and then others are not as good, and they kind of make it not as enjoyable as reading the book. So, if anybody loves audiobooks in your audience, Ray Porter is my favorite audiobook narrator. He's got a lot of science fiction books
Mhm.
that he narrates, and he's just top class in creating, just the right tone and everything for the scene.
That's very interesting. Like a friend of mine, who's a professional speaker, writes a lot of books. I mean, she's probably written more books than I can read, but she records her own books. That's that all herself using Audacity and stuff like that. And I love hearing her voice read because I can picture her and Elizabeth Gilbert when she was reading Big Magic. I thought that was amazing. And I went to hear her. It's like, oh, she actually sounds in person like she does in her book. But there's some people who are actually brilliant brilliant writers, and they should never go near a microphone because
Yeah.
everything will possibly catch your attention. The change of pace, little nuances, totally lost. Great for insomnia, but not for conveying information. So that voice and the way it's used so that, so we can hear it differently and it actually engages our imagination rather than puts us to sleep. That's quite a
Yeah.
skill.
We wrestled with that with our instructors because we have expert instructors for all our courses and learning outcomes and handouts and all these formal things. But the expert instructors, sometimes they were really good and they added to it. Other times they just distracted, and we better off hiring a voice actor to read the script and have the instructor. So yeah, we've wrestled with that quite a bit. But if I can just make one plug, I've got a new product I'm trying to launch, which is a new first in the world, which is an acted scenario book for nonfiction authors. So if you imagine it's called Book to Reality. So if you imagine a leadership book written with 7 leadership principles, perhaps what we would do is turn those into acted scenarios so that they could actually hear the conversations of that demonstrate that leadership principle, and it would be short. It wouldn't be a full audio book like a 8 or 10 hour audio book. It would be like a 1 hour audio companion that demonstrates the top principles of the nonfiction book. So it's something I'm still trying to get out there, and I think it would be super interesting. We've got a demo we did on a friend of mine, Glenn Dory. He wrote a book on leadership, and we did one of his principles as a demo. So that's on our website as well.
Well, let's make sure
Lots
we
of
get
fun
that.
things.
We'll get that into the program notes. So,
Yeah.
Russ, this has been great. I've really enjoyed it. So I can't wait to take a look at your book. And you're out here on the West Coast where I am, so it'd be great to meet sometime. In fact, I'm driving to Calgary in a few weeks and coming back through Port Moody. So,
Oh, okay. Well, let me know, and I work from home. So, where are you based, David?
I'm based up by Horseshoe Bay.
Oh, okay. Oh,
In
I was
West
just
Van,
up
but
there the other day.
yeah, I didn't see you. I was looking for you too.
I met someone. I met someone at Horseshoe Bay for a coffee for a
Now I
lunch.
know what you look like. Well,
Yeah,
Russ,
well, we'll get together. Yeah.
thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate your time. Thanks, David. Thanks for
So,
having me.
David Gouthro, Discover Fresh Perspectives. Next week, all I can guarantee that there'll be someone new with some different perspectives. Hope you have a listen then. Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.